All right. Om Vang me manasi pratisthita mano me vachi pratishthitam aviravirma edhi vedasyama anistha shrutam me ma prahasihi anenadhitena horatran samdadhami Ritam vadishyami, satyam vadishyami, tanmam avatu, tadvaktaram avatu, avatu mam, avatu vaktaram, avatu vaktaram. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Thank you. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Of course, I am coming from a bit different background, less academic and more engaged background. I am more interested in the topic itself and how it changes our life and our psychology and our way of looking at things. So, to speak a few words, I will say a few words about myself. That actually I needed Sanskrit for the yogic studies. So I thought that without Sanskrit I cannot proceed, and I cannot really understand much of what Sri Aurobindo was telling us in his books, such as Synthesis of Yoga. All his books are somehow related to Sanskrit studies. Yeah, just look at this. Life Divine is built on the commentaries on Isha Upanishad. The Synthesis of Yoga, it's all Sanskrit literature. Savitri is a story from Mahabharata. Upanishads, what he published is a powerful book. Secret of the Veda, Hymns to the Mystic Fire, Foundations of Indian Culture. Just take any book and you will see that all of them are somehow related to the Indian tradition and literature. And he himself was a poet, a great poet. And prior to Sanskrit studies, he studied Greek and Latin and French and other languages. So he was a unique representative of Indian culture. So he studied his own mother tongue, Bengali, when he arrived already in India, and also Sanskrit. He did studies by himself, which is quite remarkable because when you see how he interprets the Vedas and the Vedic texts, with which he dealt all his life from the beginning till the end of his days. Already in 1949 we have his records of mentioning the Rig Veda and making interpretation of certain verses in 1949. So, and in 1950 he left his body. He already didn't do any writings, but still he was working on the Vedic texts. There is something about this vision of Sanskrit, which is so unique and so profound, which builds the whole Indian civilization as we know it, starting from the Vedic texts, without which there would be no Brahmanas, Aranyakas, Upanishads, because they are all somehow commentaries on the Veda, on Samhita. Rig Veda Samhita is the foundation from which everything else follows. And all the Shastras, all the Vedangas, all the Darshanas, just name it, pick up one. They will be referring to the Vedas one way or another. Some of them will be arguing with Brahmanism, saying they became very ritualistic, like we have in Buddhism, for example. Buddhism was denying Vedism because of Brahmanism, because of ritualism, which became void of the spirit, as Buddha saw. So, but it's quite interesting that all of the literature which followed refers to the Veda. And even Tantra, which is the closest to us, is considered to be the Veda for Kali Yuga, as they call themselves. So in a way, everything relates to this unique and beautiful literature of the hymns, of the most inspired poetry, of the most beautiful poetry, in the most sophisticated language. The language of the Veda is much more developed, as it were, or flexible or rich than any classical tongue, by the way, any classical literature. And that is, in a way, a puzzle, you know. How come that the Vedic language was so rich and the Vedic content, psychological content, was so profound? It's not just a religion, it's a psychology of universals, where all the universal forces of higher consciousness are being invoked for the transformation of our nature. And human beings, and not only human beings, all beings. The invocation is happening to invoke these forces for transformation of the whole earth and the whole cosmos, to make it more suitable for the divine manifestation. That's why Sri Aurobindo refers to the Vedas constantly, and as he says somewhere, the Vedas were our beginning and the Vedas will remain our end. So this is something to think of, because Sri Aurobindo would never say such a thing in vain. He was very precise, very scientific. And he says that we only scratched the surface a little bit. What we know about the Veda and all what he did, such a profound topics he discovered. He gave us keys to how to read the Vedas. His works, the Hymns to the Mystic Fire and the Vedic and Philological Studies, the big volume, you can read what Sri Aurobindo did. His Origins of Aryan Speech, Secret of the Veda. It's a very rich and profound study. And after all of it, he says, we scratched only the surface and we took only the easiest part of this sophisticated system of knowledge. So what is this Sanskrit literature and why it is so important for the world and India especially? Because India is to recover its own origins, its own historical consciousness. That from the beginning of time there was an attempt in India to build up a higher civilization with higher consciousness, with a divine embodied consciousness. And it proceeded from the Vedic fundamental vision towards, through all the structures of consciousness, starting from the archaic, magic, mythical, towards mental structure, and we have already Sankhya and Yoga, which is much more scientific in its approach, and then finally Tantra, and we move into the modern age. So Sanskrit is like a red thread which connects all structures, all different ways of thinking, being, within one framework, within one language, which embraces all these structures and gives them kind of uninterrupted, unbroken sense of parampara. So we have a connection to the deeper historical consciousness. And it is happening only in India. It's the only civilization whose development was not interrupted from the prehistoric times. So why is that important? It is important because all these structures of consciousness are needed for the integral structure. They will all emerge at the end and will become efficient in building up our psychology. That's what Sri Aurobindo calls that we are entering into the subjective age and into the spiritual age. and the role of India is here fundamental. So that is about literature, but today I wanted to speak about linguistics and India's contribution to the philosophy of language. You know that India is built on the power of the word. In Mahabhashya, Patanjali mentions one profound myth of creation of the world, which is where Indra was the first student of Sanskrit, and Brihaspati was the teacher who was teaching Sanskrit to the gods. So all of them came to Brihaspati, sat at his feet, learning from him Sanskrit. So Indra was his first student, and we know that Brihaspati is the lord of the divine word, and Indra is the lord of the divine mind. So the lord of the divine mind is learning Sanskrit from the lord of the divine word. Can you imagine? What can be more significant? Patanjali says Indra understood that even 1,000 years, 1,000 is the figure of speech, it means infinity in the Vedic terminology. Even within infinity, he will not be able to complete his studies. Because there is a reason, and it's quite interesting, and here I'm coming to the etymology, because every sound or word which Brihaspati was pronouncing was actual in its power and meaning to that moment of time. So every time he pronounced something, it was real, it was true in that moment of time. So since he comes from the infinity, from the eternity, there is no end to that sound which would be actual to its own power. So Indra understood that he will never be able to complete those studies because it's infinite. So what he did, he stopped this flow of Brihaspati's speech, cut it into pieces, into grams, as it were, and created grammar. He could capture the sound which was actual, which was charged with meaning by grammatical means, by the mental categories of subject and object, by time and space and causality, by the karakas about which I wanted to talk today, karakas and vibhaktis. He separated these sounds, shaped them into varnamala, where all articulations could bring certain significances, certain general meanings, which together combined could build certain categories. So he captured the word by the mental categories, by the mind. Indra is the lord of the divine mind. He created grammar which now separates heaven and earth, meaning and sound, artha and shabda, as it were. Artha and vak got separated, but they can be united only through grammatical structure. And it's quite interesting because when we listen to each other, if I will speak to you in Russian, for example, you would not be able to understand me. And not because of the words you do not know, but the grammar you can't recognize. You cannot put together the sound which would point you to the meaning. Yeah? And here I'm coming to this idea of Sporta theory and Vachya and Vachaka and signified and signifier, which was taken from Indian literature, from Indian studies into the studies of grammar. And Saussure was actually, Saussure was the professor of Sanskrit language, by the way, and his PhD was in Sanskrit grammar. It is not well known, somehow they don't speak about this anymore, but in those times he was actually teaching these subjects. And when they wanted to publish his general linguistics, he never published it. It was the notes by the students which was published at the end. he refused to publish it 3 times because he said he's not sure. I think he was quite honest. He didn't want to really speak about these issues as if it was his discovery, because he knew that it was actually taken from the Indian philosophy of language. And that is quite interesting, because this discovery of Vachya and Vachaka, separation of the meaning and sound and their unity in a way, created the whole direction of thinking. That's what's known as structuralism, post-structuralism, phenomenology is joining that party. And we have the whole direction of development in Europe, which was inspired by Indian literature, by Bhartrihari, by Tantra, by Patanjali. Patanjali was first who mentioned Spota theory, by the way. So it is just few references to the development in Europe. And with the discovery of Sanskrit alphabet, the whole perspective changed, because till that time they had only ABC, Aleph Bet. Aleph Bet, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, we do not know what it means really. Nobody knows why after A, B, C, D, it all belongs to the system of knowledge which was brought by Moses, and Moses codified his own mysterium, his vision, his occultist vision of the reality in his own way, which is not vocal way, it is not linguistic way of arranging the letters of the alphabet. These letters were the laws of existence, symbols in a way. So he symbolized, with alphabet he made the symbolic representation of his own system of philosophy or vision of the reality. And in that sense, it was inherited by the Greeks, and then from the Greeks to Latin, and then to all the European languages. So all of them inherited this A, B, C, D, E, F, G without knowing what it really means. And that's why it was always confusing in Europe. There was never linguistic studies or really philology or any deeper knowledge or understanding how we articulate sounds and meanings until Sanskrit was discovered. And once Sanskrit was discovered, ko, kha, ga, gha, nga, all back tongue, cha, cha, ja, chana, all the palatals, tat, ha, da, da, na, ta, ta, da, da, na, pa, pa, ba, ba, ma. You have 5 vargas, you have 5 levels of articulation, all possible articulations. This knowledge was stunning for the European scholars. They could never imagine that we could have a systematic view on all sounds, which is so normal for Indians because they grew up with this knowledge. It's kind of inbuilt in their thinking. But it wasn't the case in a European tradition. So once they discovered that systematic articulation of all the sounds, the new topics are coming and the new disciplines were born. Comparative philology, Indo-European languages, general and theoretical linguistics, all of them come into being with the discovery of Sanskrit. And the father of linguistics, we can call Humboldt. Humboldt, who was actually a very high figure in Germany at that time, so at the beginning of 19th century. Wilhelm Humboldt, I'm meaning, not Alexander. So Wilhelm Humboldt, he spoke, he conversed with his students in Sanskrit. He knew by heart Gita. He learned Gita by heart. We don't know about this because it's something which is not promoted nowadays. Yeah? It's not no more fashionable to speak about Sanskrit influence somehow. And in that way, of course, if you think how much Sanskrit contributed to the development of the whole range of new subjects, humanities, social sciences. I'm even tempted to say that the whole phenomenology is taking a different turn because of that structuralism and view on Vachya and Vachaka, signified and signifier. And we can see it in the Derrida's writings. It's all there already present, Heidegger. So it influenced the European civilization directly. Language is the key. Language is how we think. Language is how we use and understand ourselves and the world, how we interact with each other, how we communicate. So linguistics is actually a major subject of all the humanities in a way. Philosophy is built on the usage of language. Psychology even is built on the usage of language. Our understanding is built on the usage of the word. So that Brihaspati's word is still there, and Indra with his structural mind, putting it into perspective, using it and developing it. But now, from now on, once Indra hijacked the Brihaspati's word and put it into his own perspective, separated it, meaning and sound, and now combines them in his own way, from now on, every word, any word, or any sound can be applicable to any context. That means from now on we can lie. Before there was no possible to lie. Brihaspati's word was always true. And now with the application of grammar, you can apply a certain word to certain context where it is not applicable. So what it means, actually, if you look into Sanskrit language, you will see that there are no such words as lie in Sanskrit language. There is only asatyam or anritam. That means not satyam. That means truth is not applicable. Notice, it's beautiful, because it means exactly that there is truth. You say the truth, but not for this context, not for this time, not in this space. So it is applicable to some other space or time. So the word is always authentic, always true, always Brihaspati's word. But it is applied in a different context. From here, all the ideas of dharma and adharma. What is adharma? Is a misalignment, misuse, misplacement of truth. If we find the proper place for every true usage, then that is dharma. If we misplace it, it is adharma. So it is not applicable. Okay, that is about the beginnings of thinking of the connection of the word and meaning. And that creates the whole direction of thinking, Spota theory. How the meaning is being revealed in speech. Through what means. And there are grades of, starting from Varna Spota, revelation through the sound, meaning through the sound, till the Vakya Spota, revelation through the text, and Pada Spota in between. So there are disputes, there are discussions, there are different directions of philosophy taking place through these different theories. A very rich environment. And that leads us to the need of etymological theory. And by the way, Sri Aurobindo was nearly the first who connected the meaning and the sound in the psychological way. So Sri Aurobindo says, law and process must have governed the origins and developments of language. Given the necessary clue and sufficient data, they must be discoverable. It seems to me that in the Sanskrit language, the clue can be found, the data lie ready for investigation. We can find an equal regularity, an equal reign of fixed process on the psychological side in the determining of the relation of particular sense to particular sound. And this is fundamental. Particular sense to a particular sound. And from there he started. He started to examine our articulations. he discovered, and it is quite discoverable for all of us, then when we articulate sound, we make a particular effort, which is reflected in our system as a particular state of psychological state. If I make an effort to articulate E sound, or U, or A, E, U, there are three different attempts, three different states of consciousness. With E, I am pressing with the tongue towards the palate. With U, I create some kind of fullness within myself. I feel as if I'm pervading the space within myself. And with A, I do not do anything. So his definitions would be quite interesting. Look at this. Let me read these definitions. The four first simple vowels, A, I, U, U, and Ri, indicate the idea of being, existence. And why the idea of being existence? Because vowels are infinite. Yeah, they are not like consonants. They are not stops. They are not sprishtas. They are not like ka, ka, ga, ga, which exists only in one touch. But A is infinite. E, it has no beginning, no end, as it were. So these four indicate the idea of being, existence. A, in its short form, indicates being in its simplicity without any further idea of modification or quality, mere or initial being, creative of space. And it's quite clear because A, no tongue, no lips, nothing is involved, only vocal cords are sounding the sound. So it's just the idea of simplicity of being, initial being, creative of space. It creates space by very vibration, but it is not modified, it is not modulated by any quality. There is no quality in it. It's undifferentiated state of existence. Let us say Sat, the being as such, pure being. E, if you try to modulate it, you will articulate it, you will feel that you have to press the middle of the tongue, to the top of your palate. E is an intense state of existence, being narrowed, forceful, insistent, tending to a goal, seeking to occupy space. So it is like an arrow flying to hit the target. It is the narrowed down, intensive state of existence. It's as if it is paying attention to it, like root chi in the chi chi ji ji ni. This chi root is to gather, to focus, to fix one's consciousness upon one point, one-pointedness. And even in Latin they write E with like one line and dot on the top. Yeah, because psychologically it is that intense state of existence being narrowed, tending to occupy the space. And then U. U is a wide, extended but not diffused state of existence. It's very charged. It is pervading the space within, being medial and firmly occupant of space. Yeah, and we can see it everywhere where we have Uru. Uru is wide. Yeah, where everywhere Udaka, water, the same etymology in the European. It is something which is firmly as a substance occupying the space. Wide, yeah, vast, all these words you can see. Ri is a vibrant state of existence, pulsing in space, being active about a point within a limit. It's like it's drilling, it's crushing, it's breaking. It's constantly that which you find in all other Indo-European languages and in Sanskrit also. So if you analyze the very substance of these simple vowels, and then you come to the consonants and combine with the consonants, you will see a very interesting picture. That Sanskrit is irregular in the change of sound and meaning. First of all, just open the dictionary, Sanskrit dictionary, and look into the words. Word after word, article after article, the meaning is changing gradually. It's not jumping. So as sound is changing, the meaning is changing. Step by step. So sound and meaning are corresponding in a way. And that makes Sanskrit a unique language. Yeah? And Sanskrit is unique in one more regard, that it does not require any other language to explain its own derivations. It refers to its own system of roots, etymons, simple root sounds, which generated other roots, generated other words, and many, many derivations. And these are simple. The simplest system of etymons is Sanskrit alphabet. Ka, kha, ga, gha, nga. And then I would say chi, chi, ji, ji, ni instead of cha, cha, ja, ja, nya, because E is more natural for palatals. So I will combine it with a palatal vowel. And then pu, pu, bu, bu, hu, mu. So ka, kha, ga, gha, nga, chi, chi, ji, ji, ni, pu, pu, bu, bu, hu, mu. And these would be first simple roots. And if you start analyzing them, you will be surprised that E is moving, constantly moving. Chi is noticing. From here, chit, consciousness as noticing. Chinoti, chinute. And chinoti, causing, focusing, piling up. From here, chitti, as piling up. And also chitta, as noticing, focusing, one-pointedness. Yeah. Then G to conquer, Shi to sharpen. You would feel all these meanings with E, and which is narrowing down, focusing, making it sharp. Yeah. And if you go through all the roots, you will see that everywhere it will play that particular varna, or that particular color, that particular flavor of meaning, of general meaning, will be in all the roots and all the words. You can feel it within the body. You can connect to it in the very meaningful way. And that explains why we have, for example, synonyms in the language. Because synonym is nothing but different roots from different sounds. We are arriving at common meaning in the Indra's way. Yeah? If I say big ocean or immense ocean or huge ocean, these are all different words. Yeah? Big ocean and huge ocean, poets feel it very different. Poets would never use big ocean where it is not applicable. They would say huge ocean. Why? Because huge has this extension. Somehow we know about it. How do we know that big is heavy, bulky, and has no space, and huge has space and extended? We know it through Brihaspati's speech. Brihaspati's speech is still alive behind our consciousness. It is still being activated by Indra every time we use our language. And that is the contribution of Sanskrit. It's a profound contribution. Connection to the original meanings, to the deeper meaning within ourselves. We can recognize it. It becomes alive in us. And as Sayana would say, those who know Vedic mantras, they bring to birth the gods, because these powers of the divine consciousness are standing behind these vibrations, and they become alive within our being and extend our consciousness. And that is the linguistic approach to Sanskrit. I will stop here, and then we'll invite any discussion. It would be interesting to speak about it more.